Hi then, welcome to day 13 of our podcast on 30 lessons I've learned in 30 years of ministry. And today I want to speak on something that will help your ministry or the work that you're doing, and it will help it greatly. And it is cultivating the habit of answering questions. Now, what do I mean by this? I heard somebody say this. He's told me many years as an elderly man. He said a church is the only place where a teacher finishes speaking and then he closes the place and goes, and we don't have right there to ask questions about the things that that person has spoken or taught about that we don't have clarity on. That when we go to school in the class, we ask questions and the teacher answers our questions. And the culture of asking questions can be misunderstood, and put it that way, or interpreted rather, to mean that you are operating in doubt and you're operating in unbelief, or you are challenging things. And this is particularly when you get into a place where there are doctrinal positions in an organization that you operate in, or these are doctrinal stream that you belong to. And therefore, anybody who questions anything there is termed as being in rebellion. Now, but questions and answers will do more for your ministry than many things. And I'll explain what I mean by this. I heard Kenneth Hagen, that's Kenneth Hagen of blessed memory. He said this. He said, there was a radio program, before I get into what I want to show in the scriptures, he said there was a radio program he was running once, and he went to this radio station. And in the radio station, what happened was he was teaching on the subject of faith, or he wanted to get on the subject of faith. And the people who owned the station said, look, we're trying to reach our young people. And can you come up with programs that will be, people say this, that will be suitable for young people? And he said, there's nothing about young or old. It's the same message we preach to the young, and it's the same message we preach to the old. Jesus didn't come in, and while he was teaching, or Paul writing letters, and said this is for the youth wing of the church, and this is for the adult wing of the church. Now did Jesus say we have to separate? Children were in the meeting. He said, let them come in, and let them also listen. And there were very young people in his team. John was very young, or a teenager, when he came in and joined Jesus in the ministry as an apostle, or a disciple that became an apostle. So the man went back and said, all right, they created their own programs for young people, what they consider to be programs for youth. He came back and told Kenneth Hagen that we went and checked the data and found out that the amount of people listening to the 3 youth programs that we had, amount of young people listening into the 3 youth programs that we had combined, did not meet the number of people that were young people that were listening to his faith seminar on the air. And that young people were responding more to his faith seminar on the air than to the 3 other programs that he created with music and all of that he put out there. And Kenneth Hagen said something. He said, the reason why the young people, and this is the lesson I want to bring out, were listening, coming to his own program, was that he was answering questions that are in their heart. Now, if you want to reach the next generation, you have to answer the difficult questions that they have concerning faith. And in this time of this transition that is going on in transgenerational issues, what is happening is, because of the way, even let's say my own generation was brought up, we were brought up in a way that, look, even if they tell you something and you may not really understand what they are saying to you, you just, let's just go on with it. But as people begin to, and that's how the younger generation, and that's how generations always discover themselves. And any generation that buries the questions that they have in their heart out of respect for the generation ahead of them will lose out on carrying the grace that they are supposed to carry to minister to their own generation. Every generation will have questions that need to be answered. And what Kenneth Hagen was saying was that, look, we're answering the teachings, we're answering questions that were inside their heart. And so when you allow people to ask questions and you encourage people to ask questions and you say, look, don't just, if you don't understand something about what we taught here, please ask questions here. Now, what happens is from the questions that you get from the people, you will come to see how the ministry actually is sitting in people. In fact, you yourself may have thought that you communicated something, and from the questions that you get, you realize that what you said was not actually heard. So it helps you to develop your own communication skills better in terms of, and that's what Paul was saying. He said that utterance might be granted. It wasn't knowledge. Paul said, I have the knowledge, the doctrinal knowledge, but that utterance may be granted, that I may speak as I ought to speak. So there's something termed being speaking as you ought to speak. In other words, communicating it with the words the Spirit of God will use to get it across to every single person so they have light on the inside of them. So it helps you in that way to look at it and to make an evaluation of it and to, build your own, all right, and it makes you a better person. They don't challenge an authority, there are questions they have. If those questions are not answered, there'll be a mental detachment from the faith. And we are seeing that a lot now, which means people are beginning to say things in rebellion that came as a result of them having questions with what was taught, that they didn't fully grasp, they didn't have a revelation of it, but they were put in a situation where, all right, you, out of maybe wanting to even go up the social ladder of the church and get promoted up in the systems or receive recognition, they didn't want to rock the boat. But even though they had those questions on the inside, and now it's like, oh, we're throwing the gauntlet, we don't understand what is going on here. People began to say this, and then they start saying and all of that. So questions are very important. Jesus went into the temple when he was young, at the age of 12, and his parents didn't find him for a while because he was asking questions and answering questions. And they began to say, what type of understanding? That's the first time they knew. Even from the questions that he asked, they said, this young boy has an understanding at a certain level. And if they, which means that the questions that Jesus was asking were questions that if the Pharisees had listened well to and decided that they would do the research properly, they would have known that God was moving into a new space there. Because the person who was asking the question was saying, look, these are unanswered things. Elihu, when he confronted Job, he said, look, I listened to the generation, and he says nobody had an answer in their mouth for the questions that Job had in his heart. That you can say several things about God, but you have to answer the question Job is asking. And the question that Job is asking is this: I lived right. I can tell you I've lived better than several people who still have their children, who still have their houses, who still have everything. How come this thing happened to me even though I live this way? If this question is not answered properly, then the coming generations are going to pull back away from God, that it looks like the person who gets close to God is the one that suffers the greatest loss. And Elihu came and says, look, this is the answer that I have. And he said, if I didn't speak up with the answer to the questions that are in the heart of the people, he said, my maker will soon have taken me out of the way, and I will have lost out on that which he called me to do. So questions and answers are very important. Let me just read a couple of scriptures. Now, of course, there are certain types of questions that you avoid, because once you open it up for questions and answers there, and you cultivate that, there will be few bad eggs that may want to use questions to generate strife, not that they are seeking for wisdom. Now, the Bible says in Luke chapter 2, verse 46, it came to pass that after 3 days that they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors, both hearing them and asking questions. Now, those doctors, they had listened to the questions of Jesus. They will have known what was coming next. In other words, those were the things that were on the heart of Jesus that he pushed towards God and crystallized what his own ministry was all about. So he could have asked them that, how come there were miracles in the Old Testament and we are not seeing miracles today? Isn't it the same God? And the Pharisees must have done and said, okay, how come this was happening and we are not seeing that again? And we have this, and they will move away from that. How come, David said this about this and we have gone back to this particular type of temple and all of this, and then move. And those are the questions, all right, that now form the bedrock of what Jesus himself came to do. Now, but he says in 1 Timothy 6:4, he is proud, knowing nothing, that's somebody here, but dotting about questions and strife of words. Now, there are people that can ask questions from a position of strife. And it is, you pick it up in the spirit that this person is just not interested here in, but they just want to bring strife. Now, don't let those small minority people there allow wickedness destroy that stream there from which a lot can come out. Okay? Those people should be shut down. Those people should be shut up. All right? And so the honest, good questions can be taken in, and you can do that, right, with wisdom. In other words, if some people want to hijack it, if it's like a town hall and people really want to hijack it, then you find a way of getting those questions and answering those questions. Then again, you find that Jethro told Moses this, said, hearken unto my voice, I'll give thee counsel, God will be with thee. Be thou for the people Godward, that thou mayest bring their causes to God. In other words, he told Moses, he said, look, an effective ministry takes the causes of the people, what is going on in the lives of the people, to God, in order to bring the answers. He said, and then you will teach them the statutes. So the statutes and the judgments he was teaching were God's response to the causes in the lives of the people, to the questions that were in the lives of the people, to the things the people were facing, to what they were. And that's how you feed people, or else there will be a disconnect. You may be doctrinally correct in what you are saying, but it is not seasonal. In other words, it's not manna there, because it's give us this manna, give us this their daily bread. Manna was day by day. All right, morning by morning, he openeth my ear. So what happens? You are feeding people. You are giving them the information that they need. I mean, there was a lady who told me something, and she sent me a message, said, and she had gone through a lot of things. I think she had gone through a divorce or something, or separation and all of that. And I never asked her about it. And she said, yesterday or Sunday, that message was for me. I found my peace. It answered all the questions I had had in my heart before God about the things that I went through in my life. I got it. It was clear. Now I'm satisfied. Not that she even says, okay, God, you must do this, you must do that. She got an explanation of everything that happened. That brings people closer to God. That brings about what you term a mental allegiance to God. That is, it gets. So a lot of people, there's a mental disconnect because those questions that they have are not being answered. And you can only carry people thus far by saying, look, believe it, don't do this. After some time, their bodies will be there, but the fullness of their heart will not be there. And there'll be no real growth in your own ministry. Now, it takes a lot to answer some questions, but you go to God in prayer and you ask him for his wisdom and you search the scriptures. And after some time, you begin to find it will deepen your own ministry. It will broaden your communication there. And when I say communication, I'm saying exactly what the scripture says, that I might speak as I ought to speak, Paul said, and grant utterance there. So it broadens that. It helps the people. It establishes them in the faith. And by that, you don't lose the incoming generation. I hope that helped you. All right. So join us tomorrow as we go to lesson 14 on the 30 lessons we have learned in ministry. Don't forget, our conference is from the 3rd to the 8th of September. God bless you all.